Welcome to another Microlar tutorial. Now, in this tutorial, we'll be implementing a muzzle flash for a weapon. Now, in order to implement a muzzle flash, it's kind of complex, and there's a lot of things that has to be done. And so, the first thing we should do is we should study how Epic does their muzzle flash, because I'm going to be implementing a very similar system, or basically a stripped down system of their system, just because it's pointless to rewrite code we don't need to rewrite. And so, sorry about that, wrong window. Alright, so right now I have the HTWeapon class open right now, and I'm at the top of their class, and in the variable section, line 232, you will start to see all the declarations for muzzle flash variables. And you'll see that this whole section right here is dedicated just to storage of muzzle flash data. Let's just go through this one by one. Now, luckily they commented it out for us, so we know what's doing what. But the first name, var name muzzle flash socket, that's basically a variable that holds a name of our socket. Now, this is a new type of variable we haven't encountered yet. The name variable, you can treat it like a string, except name corresponds to like an asset, or basically a string that points to something in a package or a socket or something that exists asset wise. So you can think of it like that. Now this the next one is this muzzle flash PSC and templates. Good thing to get in your head right now is PSC stands for particle system component, not particle system, and make sure you know that it's particle system component, because this is pretty important, because what this does is the component that we add. Okay, the components are responsible for things like updating itself and rendering and things like that. We don't actually render or use our muzzle flash asset directly. What we do is we add a particle system component to our mesh, and then we tell the component to use our particle system as a template for creating the muzzle flash. So basically, a particle system component is something that allows us to draw particle systems, and it handles creating the particle system, destroying it, uh, turning it on or off, making it visible, whatever. All the things that you can do with the particle system component handles. And you can load in different particles into your component, whatever. But yeah, we need a particle system component in order to draw things. Now, right now you'll see that it says UT particle component system, meaning we're using an Unreal particle system component. But don't worry about having to rewrite this class or whatever for our own purposes, because even though we are driving from UT code, creating our own particle system component is going to be really easy, because if you go to the particle system component code, you'll see all they did was just extended UDK particle system component, and that's it. And so we can derive from UDK because UDK is not part of UT, so it's perfectly fine for us to drive straight from UDK, and we don't need any added functionality because obviously the UT particle system component didn't implement anything else. It's a pure shell class that had nothing to do with it. So you'll see that I've already made a class here, HT particle system component. It basically extends UDK particle system component. It's the same thing as this, except it has HT instead of UT, so it's our own. In case we do need to add something of our own, but I doubt that we will ever have to. So there you go. That's a particle system component. Just extend UDK particle system component and you're done. Nothing else there. Back to our HTWeapon. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead down to line 232 where all our muzzle flash stuff is. Or 232, my bad. And so next variable we have here is a boolean that says show muzzle flash even when the weapon is hidden. Basically, this taught, like, say if your weapon is invisible for whatever reason, you can still have it render a muzzle flash, and that's cool. But there you go, that's what it does. Normal fire and alt fire templates. Okay, now this is kind of where the naming gets confusing. We have two variables here, and they're both particle systems. One is muzzle flash PSC template, and the other is muzzle flash alt PSC template. basically the first variable here, this is the particle system we're going to use for our primary fire. And this is the particle system we're going to use for a secondary fire, or your alt fire, alternate fire, however you want to say what it is. That's what it is. Now you'll see that in my implementation of this, I will be using an array of particle systems instead of just two, because I think I'm going to be creating a weapon with 3 fire modes in the future. So I would like to just be able to go particle system 2 out of the array instead of having to create a third variable and handling all that logic. So in my implementation, I'm using an array, but you can use whatever you want really, as long as you have a particle system to use. Oops, I accidentally clicked something. Back to line 232. Alright, so the next variable here is color, is muzzle flash color. And that basically is the code of your muzzle flash. Now, I have not implemented this yet, but that's because I just want a standard yellow muzzle flash. We will be implementing this later though, and when we start doing team games and stuff like that. So, what this does is particle systems are allowed to have dynamic parameters which you can access in script, and that allows you to change their color or whatever you want to change, and that's all there is to it. Now this here, B muzzle flash PSC loops, this is the toggle if you want the muzzle flash to loop or not, and that's cool, but yeah, we'll implement that later if we need to. Now, dynamic light. This UDK explosion light basically spawns a light at your muzzle flash that will basically light the area around you. Now, we are going to be implementing this, but I'm going to be waiting till not this tutorial, but the next one in order to implement explosion light and stuff like that, because putting it all in one tutorial will be a little bit much. And same thing with this here. This is basically it tells you, it stores the class of our muzzle, of our light, and this here is our light itself. But once again, we'll get into that later. Alright, so how long the muzzle flash will be. That's pretty important. Muzzle flash duration. Basically, you can say how long the muzzle flash will be, and it will kill itself after that duration. Pretty important. I'll be using that. Whether muzzle flash has been initialized. This is kind of weird, but the way muzzle flashes work is when you attach in order to use a muzzle flash or to render one, you need, once again, a particle system component. And in order to use a particle system component, you must attach that particle system component to your weapon. Now, what this variable will hold is it'll hold true if we've already attached our particle system component. That way we don't have to check to see if it's attached. We can just check this here. And if it's not attached, this will be false. Then we will attach it and set this to true. We'll go through that later. And then that's all there is for the variables for muzzle flash. There's all these other stuff here, but we'll go into that later. And we've already covered player view offset and some of this stuff before. But this is the muzzle flash code, or variable declaration I should say, 232 to 264. Now let's go over the code flow, I guess you can call it, of what Unreal does in order to spawn our particle effect. And the first thing it does is there's a function in the base weapon class called, play fire effects. And this function, it's not declared, or it's not defined here, but it is declared in the base weapon class, is a function that automatically gets called every time the weapon is fired or needs to show fire effects. So, and it's called from pawn weapon fired. There you go. So let's go ahead and look up that code in HTWeapon. Play fire effects. Here's their definition for it. And basically they have some weapon animation stuff which we haven't done yet. And then we have start muzzle flash effect, and it runs this function calls muzzle flash. So we'll take a look at that in a second. And then shake view. Shake view is like it shakes your view, and it's right here. I won't be implementing that yet, but very good if you want it. Alright, so now we have cause muzzle flash. So what cause muzzle flash does, let's go check it out. It is an event that causes the muzzle flash to turn on and set up a time to turn it back off again. With this code, let's just go through this code. Now, we have two local variables, a pawn and a muzzle template. We can go ahead and change this UT pawn to HT pawn. And what this here does is it checks to see if our game is not a client for whatever reason, and if it basically, if we have authority to spawn a muzzle flash on a player, we will do it. If not, then we won't. It's kind of weird, but that's what it does. So yeah, you can just copy that completely. Except for this P update eye height, you might want to take that out. In fact, I think I do take it out. Let me check my code really quick. Sorry about this. I have my reference code open at the same time, just because it makes tutorial making easier. And look at it right here. It's all not pretty. Yeah, as you can see, I don't have that P update height. Alright, so now we have this cause muzzle flashlight. We're not spawning a dynamic light or anything right now, but we will do that later. So, but that handles making the light and glowing the area around you. Now there's a bunch of stuff here, but this basically says if our fire mode, if we're firing and our weapon's not hidden and we have hands on our screen, basically if we're showing our weapon, let's show our muzzle flash. And B muzzle flash attached. This is our boolean that shows that checks to see if we have attached a variable or not. And Skype spam just happened to. Awesome Skype spammers. Anyways, so yeah, if we don't have it attached, we attach it. If we do have it attached, we just skip it. Easy way to check that. Now, just go check out the attached muzzle flash real quick, just to see what's actually going on there. And what this does is it has a local variable, skeletal mesh component, and it sets our muzzle flash to true. That way we can track that we've attached it. And it loads our current mesh into this local variable. And basically, by casting into a skeletal mesh, we can check to see if our weapon is a skeletal mesh, and it should be. There's no reason for it not to be. Now, with that, we actually do the muzzle flash logic. And what this checks to see if we have any type of muzzle flash template already stored for us to use, then we'll go ahead and we'll create a particle system component. Oops, I did not mean to click that. And then we'll basically set its settings, and let's go back to that real quick. Sorry about that. We're creating a new muzzle flash component, or a new particle system component, and then we turn auto activate off. That way it just doesn't start showing up randomly. And this depth priority group basically tells it that it wants to render in the foreground, so that if there's anything else in the foreground, it will kind of render this first, compare it to the background, stuff like that. And then we have set FOV. This basically sets the muzzle flash field of view to our field of view. It's more of a particle thing, but there you go. Then we have attached component to socket. This is the main important one right here. What this does, it takes our skeletal mesh, basically our weapon mesh, and then attaches our particle system component to our socket, which is the muzzle flash socket, which is what we'll define later on. And so basically, wherever our muzzle flash socket is on our weapon, it will attach our particle system component to that socket, so that when we tell our particle system component to activate, it will use that socket as the origin for the particle systems it emits, and that's where our muzzle flash will be, and that's how it will look. It'll be all right at the barrel of our gun. Exactly what we need. Without this, we would have no way to control particles, because there are ways to spawn straight up particle systems, but nothing like the particle system component that allows us to turn it on and off and things like that. Let's go back to cause muzzle flash, and we'll see that after we have it attached, we check to see if we have it on the muzzle flash component. Because if something happens and we lose our particle system component, then there's no point in using it because we don't have one. So it's always good to check to see if you have the things you're working with. Now, with this here, this if loop here is checking to see if we're not looping, or it's seeing if our weapon or our muzzle, sorry, if our particle system component is not active or if it was deactivated. Now, what this basically ensures is that say if our muzzle flash is already being shown and we're not looping, that means we shouldn't touch it, because then, if it's not activated, then it's not looping. That means we can touch it, which means it's available for us to use so we can fire it. But if it is active and we're not looping, or we're not looping, then it won't do anything because of the fact that it's already active, and we don't want to have our particle system component do twice the work in the same amount of time, because it kind of messes with our logic a bit. But yeah, it's kind of weird, but you get used to it. In fact, in my implementation, I took this out because of the fact that I don't have any looping particle systems yet. Now, we have a local variable here, I believe, particle system muzzle template. And this muzzle template is just basically a local variable that stores what particle system we're going to be using. Because in this line here, on this if condition, we see that it checks to see if our instigator is not none, which means someone's firing it. And it checks to see if our firing mode is 1, which is alt fire or right click. And it checks to see if we have a muzzle flash for our secondary fire, for alt fire, fire mode 1. And if so, we assign our alternate muzzle flash to muzzle template. And what this here does is it will hide the muzzle, or it will ignore going hidden if we have set show alt muzzle PSC when weapon hidden. You know, that variable that controls will our muzzle flash show if our weapon is hidden. So that's what that does. Now, else if, which means our firing mode is not 1 or anything, then we have our muzzle flash PSC template. Now, this will be called if our firing mode is 1, but we don't have an alternate fire muzzle flash, it'll just default back to our regular muzzle flash if we have one. But this is our default muzzle flash for firing mode 0, our primary fire anyway. So if we have a default muzzle flash, our muzzle template will equal that instead of our alternate fire. Now, what this here checks to see if our muzzle flash template that we're going to be using, if it's not equal to our particle system component's template, then we will set the template to our muzzle template. Now, what the particle system component template is basically it stores a particle system in it, but you're not actually spawning that asset directly. You're spawning particles that use your asset as a template. So basically, our muzzle flash particle system in actuality is a template for other particle systems that will be based off our particle system. So, because you can have multiple instances of a particle system, and if you're spawning that single particle system, then things get kind of crazy because you have to manage all these different instances of that one object instead of using a template where that template just basically stores all the settings of the particle system but doesn't use it directly, if that makes sense. So if the muzzle template we want to use is not the template we are using, we'll go ahead and set that. So say if we have a primary muzzle template that we're using, and suddenly we go into secondary fire, this will switch it to our secondary muzzle. However, if we are secondary fire and we secondary fire again, we're already using the same muzzle, so it's not going to reset it. So it makes it a little bit nicer for us and a little bit more performance easier, I guess. Performance lighter performance there. I don't know. Probably want to say that. Sorry, kind of not thinking tonight. Now, set muzzle flash parameters. What this does here is it sets muzzle flash parameters. let's go to that function. And see, we have two parameters here. We have muzzle flash color and its scale. Basically, they've hard coded every muzzle flash scale, every muzzle flash particle to use half its scale. I don't know why, but I guess they were just lazy to scale it down to begin with. I'm not sure. Now, but this first one here, this allows us to set the color of our muzzle flash if we were using that type of system. And it's pretty easy. I mean, you just set the color parameter of your particle system component, and if we have a dynamic variable in our particle system called muzzle flash color, it will set it to muzzle flash color. Really simple. I don't go over how to add dynamic variables to cascade particle systems, just because I'm not a cascader, but we might go over that in the future if we ever decide to implement this. Alright, so let's go back to muzzle flash. Alright, so now that we have our muzzle set up right, what did my thing do? There we go. Now we activate the particle system. This is where muzzle flash actually goes, hey, show me. And it shows. That's simple. So this, I guess you can say this starts drawing our muzzle flash. Yeah, it just activates. That's all it activates our particle. There you go. Cool. Now, what we're doing here below this is we're setting a timer to turn off the muzzle flash. And we do that underneath all these if statements. That way we're always sure that our muzzle flash is off, instead of having to check all these if statements every time we want to make sure it's off. Now, doing this basically means whatever we set as our flash duration, it will just deactivate our particle system component. So even if our emitter has like a length or has like a lifetime of 2 million seconds, the particle system component will deactivate it after our muzzle flash duration, and it will after our muzzle flash duration, it's going to run the function muzzle flash timer. So let's go ahead and look up that function, and we'll see what that does. Muzzle flash timer is somewhere in here. And that's right here. And what that does is, if we have a particle system component and we're not looping, we deactivate. We check to see if we're not looping, because the timer is going to be reset every time we fire. But if we want to loop it for something like a minigun, then there's really no point in deactivating it and then reactivating it. So we'll just go ahead and loop it. But if we aren't looping and we do have a particle system component, we'll just deactivate it. We'll turn it off. So I'm going to go back to cause muzzle flash. Scroll back down. And right on in here we have another event, stop muzzle flash. Basically what this does is the same thing as muzzle flash timer. In fact, we even call muzzle flash timer. So, but this clears the timer. That way if we ever need to force our particle system to stop muzzle flashing, we can just call this. It'll clear the timer so it won't run. It won't try to turn it off again even though it's already off. And then muzzle flash timer, we just looked at that function. It'll turn it off. And then if it's still not off, we will check to see if we'll force it off by saying if we have a particle system, we don't care if it's looping or not. We'll just want to straight up and deactivate it, just like that. So this is just a function that's needed to say if we ever need to go and stop it ourselves, then we have that there. Alright, so that's how you create a particle system, or that's how you create a muzzle flash. So let's go ahead and implement that. Okay, so the first step in our implementation is creating the variables you're going to need to be using. And so luckily for me, I've already typed this up learning how to do this. So I'm going to go ahead and paste what I've wrote here, and you can follow along. Now, these are basically the same variables you saw in HTWeapon, except I'm not using all of them. I'm only implementing the ones I want to implement. We'll go over how to implement everything else in the future. So we're just going to keep this as simple as possible for now. Now, the first thing is our muzzle flash socket. That holds the name of our muzzle flash socket. I even copied their comments because they explain exactly what they do. So like, why not keep them? Now, you'll see here that I'm using my HT particle system component. Now, we've already been over how to derive new classes, so you should know how to do that. And all I've done, as I went over before, is UT particle system is straight up derived from UDK particle system component. So I'm going to go ahead and derive from UDK as well, because it's identical, no code, so it's going to function exactly the same. It's just going to be under our name in case we need to create some custom code here in the future, which I doubt we will ever will. Now we have that there. Now this is where my code differs from Epic's code, and I'll be creating an array of particle systems instead of just 2 particle systems. This allows me to have multiple fire modes that will automatically use the right muzzle flash if I have different muzzle flashes for each fire mode. So say if I want 3 or 4 fire modes for a gun, which might sound silly, but later on, after I go over some weapon tutorials, you'll see kind of why I'm doing this. But so an array of particle system, it's basically, so I think it's easier for us to manage that way too, because we can now use cool little logic in order to figure out which muzzle flash we're using instead of these long if statements that Epic was using. Now, the second variable, or the fourth variable we have here, is a muzzle flash duration. Epic had this too, kind of need it, kind of important. Go ahead and keep that there. And muzzle flash attached, another really important thing. It just saves time and makes it allows us to know that we've already attached a particle system component. Alright, so as you can see, I've also added some commented headers here just because it makes things easier to read. In fact, I'm gonna scroll down now. Okay, so actually, all this is ammunition inventory. I'm gonna go ahead and because this is where the functions start here, I'm just gonna start another code block here and name it muzzle flash methods, I guess. Alright, so now that we have a place to start writing our code, which is conveniently located in our variables, most of the time our functions and our variables won't be structured that nicely, but in this case, I figured if it's right here, right on the edge of the variable function declaration, why not? So, actually, I'm wrong. There's a replicated event function right above this, so we need to move that down because we can't declare variables after we start declaring functions. So I'm going to go ahead and just paste this right here. And I want to copy this little header I got going on. Whoa, wrong button. And go replication. Yay! Now we have our own little section for muzzle flash methods. Now the first thing we have to do is we have to change play fire effects because that's what starts all our weapon firing stuff. So play fire effects is once again, I've already kind of written this up. Basically this is a copy paste from Epic's code, and I believe this is the UT weapon code. We pull that up just so you can see that. Play fire effects right in here. Oh, that's right. I took out the weapon animation code and I took out shake view. So that's what's going on there. All the play fire effects does is it just starts on muzzle flash. And now I'm just going to save this because that's a good habit to get into, saving your work. Now let's go ahead and start our create muzzle flash function. And once again, I've already copied my own code that I prepared. We'll walk through it again. Alright, so our function starts out with calls muzzle flash, and we have 2 local variables, HTWeapon P and particle system muzzle template. In fact, this is structured almost identical to Epic's code. It's just that I removed a few if statements, such as one of the things I removed is the B update eye height, because there was some logic going on in there that was kind of interesting and not relevant. So for that, I didn't even check that. And you also see I have some print screen debug. I was just debugging some stuff to see why how this code flow is working. Let's go ahead and go and delete all this print screen debug. Now, as you can see, I still have the cause muzzle flashlight in here, and that's because eventually I want to create those the dynamic lights that will glow the area around you for a split second when you fire your gun. But I don't want to implement it right now because I want to save that for the next tutorial, and so I just commented that out. Alright, now this is where it gets interesting. Alright, so what we're doing here is we're checking our instigator fire mode and see if it's less than our muzzle flash PSE template length. Now, if you remember in my code, muzzle flash PSE template length is an array, or muzzle flash PSE template is an array of muzzle flash particle systems. So the way I have it set up is so that firing mode 0, primary fire, is going to correspond to the 0th index of our muzzle flash template. And what this is checking to say if we say we do muzzle flash or firing mode 6 and we only have 3 muzzle flashes in an array, it's just going to skip all this because we don't have a muzzle flash for it. Now, the Epic's method of having 2 variables allowed it to do easier checks to just run the default muzzle flash. I mean, we could do that here too, but I'll leave that up to you as a small challenge. Now, so basically, I'll go over that one more time because that sounded kind of weird. Say if we have a muzzle flash that's not for a firing mode, it won't default to the first muzzle flash like Epic's code does. But at the same time, this will like simplify our if statements as well. So, but it's really easy to use a default one. Just say if it's do an else and say if we have a muzzle flash template length of 1, we'll go ahead and use that first muzzle flash, whatever how you want to do it. And that's up to you. That's blue code challenge to you. Here's another print screen debug. I was just saying this is we have a muzzle flash. Now, we check to see if our particle system component is attached, and if it's not attached, we attach it, just like Epic's code. And we'll go over the attach muzzle flash function later. And they're going to keep seeing me delete code, and that's just my print screen debug code that I have there, just for testing purposes. We created this function back when we first created our weapon class, and that just prints to the screen. So it's pretty helpful sometimes. Now, what this checks to see if, well, first this checks to see if our array is of the right length. What this if statement is checking is to see if we actually have a template to use in that slot, which actually can be moved up in this if statement as well. So, but I'm just gonna leave it there for now, just so we can expand it later. So basically, if we have enough muzzle flashes for a firing mode, and if we have a muzzle flash in the firing mode index of our array, then we'll continue to do our code. And that sounds kind of weird as well, but it's basically saying, I'll open up MS Paint here. Alright, so if we have an array, here's our array. It's a box. This is our muzzle flash particle system component array. And say we have 2 muzzle flash particle system templates. This is firing mode 0, our primary fire, and this is our alternate fire. The way arrays are structured is that the first element in the array is our 0 index, and the second element is our 1 index. And as you can see, that matches our firing mode structure just perfectly. So what this code statement is doing is it's checking our fire mode, and say if we're hitting our primary fire button, our fire mode is going to be 0. So we're going to go ahead and pass in 0 to this function, and it's going to look what's indexing here is basically putting 0 in here. So it's going to look into this index of our array, which is 0, so it's going to look in here. Now, if we have a particle system template in this element, that means not equal none will be true, and it will continue the code. However, say if we only, for whatever reason, had a muzzle flash template for our secondary fire, then this will equal none. Just like this. And our code here won't fire, or our code here won't even trigger. So all this is checking to see if we have a muzzle flash that corresponds to our firing mode in our array. And this here is where you would override things like, oh, default back to the original if you don't have a muzzle flash for it. And my little print screen debug here is just saying, oh, we have a muzzle flash template for this fire mode. I'll go ahead and delete that. Now, our next if statement, just like Epic's code, it checks to see if our muzzle flash is available for use. I didn't implement looping anything here, but we're basically checking to see if our muzzle flash is not active or it was deactivated. Because the way the particle system works, you can deactivate it in the same frame it's active, and if you pull that, I believe it will still say it's active even though it was deactivated that same frame. So this just basically says if we're ever in that situation, it's still good to use because it was deactivated, but it just hasn't had time to clear the active flag. So it's still available for us, so we're going to use it anyway. Now, next line here, it assigns our local variable muzzle flash template, just like how Epic had, to whatever our element was. I accidentally closed that paint document, but it's going to pull that muzzle flash template that we have in our array and put it in a copy of it into muzzle template. So, and we already made sure we had one, so we can do that. Now, yeah, this is my little comment here, but basically we've already been through this code before. If our particle system component is already using our particle system template that we've assigned to our temporary variable, we won't assign a new template. But if it isn't, we'll go ahead and swap out a particle system component template that it's using with our template. That way, we're firing the right muzzle flash. And then, as you can see, I've also had included a set muzzle flash parameters, but I believe that's just a shell class that I wrote. Yeah, this is my set muzzle flash parameters function right here. All it does is returns, but that allows any subclasses in the future to set their own muzzle flash parameters if they need to. Alright, so with that there, then we activate our muzzle flash. Basically shows our muzzle flash. You've seen, we've been through this before. And then once again, we set a timer to turn off our muzzle flash after our duration, just so we don't have our particle system looping forever or showing for its full length or whatever the case. And that's our cause muzzle flash function. Kind of a lot of stuff. If you don't get it at first, if you keep rereading it and you keep just basically seeing how the things work together and maybe replaying this video a few times, it should be pretty clear what's going on here. I mean, there's quite a few things going on here, but it's still manageable, I think. And all this code exists only in your base weapon class, so there's no other classes involved. All this code is in this file, so I guess that helps a little bit. Now I'm going to go ahead and take some code similar to what Epic wrote, and this is muzzle flash timer. If you remember, this is the same thing as Epic's code, except I disabled the is looping check. So there you go. And then stop muzzle flash. This is once again another function that allows us to immediately stop the muzzle flash. It's the same exact thing, but once again, all this does, it just doesn't check for if it's looping. That's all there is to it. And that actually seems to be it for how. Oh no, that's not it. Remember our attach muzzle flash function? We need to go over that. And so I'm just going to go ahead and copy in my attach muzzle flash function, just like this. Instead of copying from Epic, I'm just kind of copying from my code already, but it should make more and more sense. Yeah, these future tutorials, they're going to get more and more okay, I guess you can say less and less about actually uh, taking the code, but just basically what the code is and how it works. And that way, it should be pretty obvious on how to write it, how to manipulate it, things like that. So you can build your own code without relying too much on other stuff. Alright, so attach muzzle flash. And as it says, it's called on the client, attaches a weapon attachment to the mesh. That comment can use a little bit more rewriting, because this is not attached to a weapon attachment. That's a completely different thing. This is the muzzle flash particle system component. That's what that does. So it's just like Epic's code. In fact, it is identical to Epic's code, except for the fact that instead of a UT particle system component, it is an HT particle system component. It checks to see if we have a skeletal mesh. It says, do we have... Oh, this is different, I guess. It checks to see if we have muzzle flash templates to use. If not, there's no reason to attach it. But if we do, then we'll just attach it. And that's all there is to it. We don't automatically activate it. We set the FOV, but it's just like Epic's code. And I've already explained that, so I'm not going to go over that again. Alright, so now with all that there, we're pretty much set. So we can go ahead and go to our default properties block. As you can see here, this is my default properties block. There's a damn moth in my room. Huh. Alright, so what I've had it here is these three little variables here. Really simple. So we can go down to our default properties block, which is now, for me at least, line 507. And I'm going to go ahead and paste these variables in here. Now, I'm going to go back to the top, or actually if you're using Walt Greal or whatever, you pronounce that, you can see your variables on the left. And I'm just going to use that. But if you don't remember what we declared as the variables, go ahead and scroll up to the top and you'll see that. Now, the first thing we have here is a muzzle flash socket. And the name of my muzzle flash socket is muzzle flash socket. It's kind of weird, but that's how it works. You will write, you don't put this as a string because it's a name, you just basically straight out type exactly what you want to put there. And if you go to our weapon, if you go back to RM16, I added a socket to muzzle called muzzle flash socket, but I'll be going over that again in case you haven't done that. Alright, now for muzzle flash duration, I want my muzzle flash to exist for 0.05 seconds. So there we go. And then our next variable is muzzle flash particle system template. And what that does is basically sets our default primary file to our muzzle flash that we're going to create if you haven't created it yet. If you don't know how to create a particle system, I have a small tutorial about it, 17 minutes long, but it's very programmer arty, just like our textures and stuff we've done before. It looks really, really bad, but it works. If you know how to create a particle system or you're an artist, you can go ahead and learn Cascade yourself. Not through me because I'm not a good teacher in Cascade, because I don't know it. But I will. But good tutorials to follow that up with are the 3D Buzz tutorials, which you can find by just going to Google. Just type in UDN documentation. And click on the first link. Go to Development Kit on the left. Go to UDK, or go to Video Tutorials under Essential Reading. And Particles. Just download that. They do a really good job on explaining how to use particles. There's also a lot more other resources. I know that there's a guy named Raven on our forums that if you just go to our forums and you search Raven, it's going to give you a lot of things here. Hopefully it's somewhere up on this list. I'm just going to go search Raven tutorials. There we go. And it'll pop right up on the first one, UDK video tutorials. He's got a lot of stuff here. But he's got some good particle stuff, I believe. I believe it was this guy. However, now I'm not seeing it. Huh. He's got a lot of good tutorials anyway. So, that's weird. Yeah, so just search our forums for people posting particle tutorials. There's lots of good stuff there. And yeah, UDK video tutorial effects. So this guy's got some good stuff too. Creating fire and smoke. Go ahead and click his YouTube. There you go. Shows you how to make fire. Really cool. But that's all editor stuff. So once you get your particle system, I'll go over that after we compile our code too. But go ahead and put your full name for your particle system right in there as a primary fire. If you already want to do secondary fire shit, you can go ahead and put a second muzzle flash, or just put one here instead, and now do your secondary fire. So that's how that works. So now that we have that there, our last variable that we declared, besides no flash socket, this array, our particle system component, we're going to be creating that in the code, so we don't have to worry about declaring that. And same with our boolean. This is just going to be handled by the code. So the three variables we only need to initialize are these three here. That's all there is to it. So let's go ahead and compile our code and see what happens. And no errors and no warnings. Awesome. Now, I know I didn't hand type most of this stuff just because I copied over from my other code, because I'm getting more and more streamlined, I guess, in my process, and I just want to show you how it all works. And I have the code as a written versions on my site the entire time, and I'm going to start posting zip files of all the code at the end of this current tutorial, so you can always look at that too for reference. And this is all completely working with the March build, so if you have any problems, make sure you're on the March build right now, and then get the zip file that'll be attached to this tutorial, and your stuff should work. Now I'm going to go ahead and, because it compiled successfully, I'm going to go ahead and open up my editor, just so I can go over the particle system a bit more. Yeah, if you don't have a particle system yet, and you code all this, you can pretty much put whatever you want in here, but you're going to compile it, and you're going to get a warning saying, this is not, and I cannot find reference to this package or whatever. Go ahead and ignore that. Go ahead and just put whatever you want there, and you can make your particle system, and then you can once you made it, go back and put your code in there. Alright, so as you can see, this is my muzzle flash right now, and it's actually firing really fast. If you followed the tutorial that I made, I basically ended it with, this is how it's going to look, but we're going to do tweaks later in order for it to show up in game. This is what happens. This is the result of our the tutorial that I made, and you'll get something that looks like this. It's slow, but it works. I mean, it looks like, well, it looks like a badly textured muzzle flash that has random variations in textures, which is cool. But if you were to use this muzzle flash, I found it doesn't spawn fast enough, and you won't see it in game, which I thought was kind of weird. So if you ever have a problem where you made a particle system for a muzzle flash and it's just not showing up even though you've done all the code correctly, this is what I've had to do. I'm pretty sure this is the wrong way of doing it, but it works. So that's all that matters. And as you can see, my particle system is going lightning fast, but at the same time that kind of makes sense. So what I've done here is I changed the spawn rates for my particle emitters. Once again, this is different from my tutorial. If you already have your fast muzzle flash particle system for your own stuff, go ahead and use it. But if you follow my particle tutorial, you'll see that under spawn, I changed rate scale distribution constant to 50, and that makes it really fast. And I did the same thing for the other particle emitter too, and that just makes it really fast. And that's all of what I've done from the tutorial. That's the only thing that's changed. So yeah, once you make your particle system, you can go ahead and right click it, copy full name to clipboard, and just paste it right here. And you'll see for me it's going to turn out to be exactly the same thing. Paste. And that's all there is to it. So you can save, you can compile that if you have to recompile it. But now we can load our game. And I'm not sure how this is going to show up with Camtasia recording my demo here. But if you left click, boom, and you'll see that if you have any print screen debug function calls, you'll see it on your screen to the left. But when you left click, it's firing your muzzle flash. And I just ran out of ammo, so it's not going to fire anymore. But that's how you add a muzzle flash. And if you spend the time to make a really good muzzle flash, you can have a pretty good looking weapon. So the next tutorial will be about how to create a light so that when you left click, the muzzle flash will show and it'll glow the area around you, which might be cool for some really bright firing weapons, or like a really cool energy gun that should just glow when you fire it, you know, things like that. But once again, it's going to be all programmer based, so it's going to look really but you just bring an artist on board and have some good looking stuff already implemented. See, I'm focusing on the implementation, other people can focus on the artwork. I mean, look at that M16 for example, and that crosshair. I mean, that's terrible, but what can you do? It's all about implementation. The art can always be redone. The implementation has to work for the art to even exist. Alright, so I'm just going to go ahead and replay it just so I can show you the muzzle flash a little bit more. And you can see it kind of has some variation. It works. It works. That's cool. That's cool. And that's our muzzle flash. We have it implemented. Don't you feel proud? So next tutorial, I'll be going over how to create a dynamic light that will spawn. Happy developing, and hopefully your weapon will muzzle flash just as well as mine. Hopefully better.